This week on Superlift's Off-Road Adventures, Trent's back in the garage with Project Budget Buggy, and we're finishing up our trail ride coverage from the 2007 Easter Jeep Safari in Moab, Utah. So don't move a muscle because it's all coming up next.
Welcome once again to the best off-road show on the air. It's been a while since Trent's got his hands dirty in the garage, and today he's shifting the budget buggy into low range by adding a new Atlas transfer case. But that's not all we have in store. Later on, we'll be finishing up our coverage of this year's Easter Jeep Safari with some unbelievable trail action. So let's hurry and get to the garage where Trent has a trick or two up his sleeve for Project Budget Buggy.
Something tells me this is going to be a good day. Now, welcome back to the shop here at Superlift Off-Road Adventures. It seems like it's been a while since we've been in here, but believe me, there has been plenty of work going on while you've been gone. Now, it's also been a while since we've seen Project Budget Buggy. In our last segment, we finished up all the fab work, and then the chassis had a date with the paint shop. Now, if you're a long-time viewer of the show, you know that I try and keep our builds as real-world as possible, something that just about anybody could duplicate. But I've also noticed, after building several vehicles here, that I always tend to splurge on just one item, something that isn't necessarily critical, but something that would certainly enhance the vehicle's versatility, or in some cases, comfort. Well, this is my splurge item for Budget Buggy. You see, I was running the numbers on the stock TJ transfer case we were going to use and realized it didn't have quite enough low range to do any real rock crawling. So there are several solutions to this problem, but this is by far the best. Now, this is an Atlas transfer case manufactured by Advanced Adapters, and it is the transfer case to have in both the recreational and competition rock crawling worlds. But this transfer case is special for another reason, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. You see, Budget Buggy is back. I think you'd like to see how it looks, huh? Not too bad for a wadded up old TJ, if I do say so myself, especially when you consider what this thing looked like beforehand. Now, this is a factory Wrangler frame, and then AFW Motorsports offers this tube chassis that you weld to it. All the rest of this stuff is either parts from the donor Jeep or stock replacements. Now, the color is actually a Toyota color called Blue Streak, and the chassis has been powder coated gray. Believe it or not, it was actually cheaper to powder coat the chassis than it was to paint it. Now, of course, we have made a few upgrades along the way. Now, for example, we have this high clearance option from AFW Motorsports that raises the steering box and incorporates a winch mounting plate, but it does require the use of a short drum winch. And up until a couple years ago, you could only get a short drum in around a 6,000 pound capacity. But thanks to the explosion in rock crawling competitions, Warren has released a 9.0 RC to meet the compact demands of competition chassis. Now, this is a true 9,000 pound winch, but it uses a short drum that accepts synthetic rope. And we've also installed the PSC Motorsports high volume steering box. Now, this is an upgrade over the stock piece, and besides, the old one was leaking. This has been plumbed to their high volume power steering pump, which we showed in a previous episode. Now, underneath, the steering box is hooked to a heavy-duty steering kit from Chris Durham Motorsports. Now, this allowed us to flip the tie rod over because factory it mounted below the knuckle for better ground clearance, and the tubing itself is heavy gauge DOM. Now, the tie rod ends are factory heavy-duty GM parts that are both plentiful and relatively inexpensive. Well, and that pretty well finishes things up for the front. Now, we do have our modified cold air intake kit installed from 4Wheel Parts, which, by the way, also supplied a new TJ windshield frame. Now, I do need to get the glass put in it, but then it will install right on the cowl just like it did from the factory. Now, all the plumbing and wiring are done from the firewall forward. Now, the wiring on the dash, on the other hand, is still what I would call a work in progress. But the nice thing is, because we're using most of the original drivetrain as well as the chassis, the factory wiring harness can also be reused. I simply stripped out things I'm not going to need, like, the heater, the radio, things of that nature. We've also installed the custom fuel tank that KFW Motorsports supplies with their buggy kit. Now this accepts the factory fuel pump and sender, and all I had to do to install it was extend the power leads as well as the fuel line. Now that pretty well brings us up to present day, and I don't know about you, but I am ready to get the rest of these hard parts installed. So let's get back to that transfer case. Now I mentioned that this transfer case is special. Now the Atlas II has been around for several years and is available in a wide range of low-range configurations. What makes this one different is this new housing that's on the front. It's because this is an Advanced Adapter's brand new 4-speed Atlas. This thing has 2 low-range ratios that furthermore can be combined to create one massive crawler gear. Now the 4-speed is available in 2 configurations. You have 272 and 3.8 that can be combined for a whopping 1044-to-1 crawler gear. Now I thought that might be a bit extreme for this application, so I went with the other option, which is 2-to-1. 272, they can be combined for a 544-to-1 crawler gear. Now that's going to be perfect for the buggy because the 2-to-1 will be handy for running around in the sand. The 272 will be just right for light-duty trail use where you don't want to hold up the pack with super low crawler gears, and you can engage that 544 when it's time to hit the big stuff. Now there are a few preparation steps before we install this in the buggy, so get that started and then we can test fit these shifters.
Well, Budget Buggy has come a long way since that chassis, frame, and hunk of junk donor Jeep Trent drug in here a few months back. Stay tuned. When we get back, we're finishing up our 2007 Easter Jeep Safari coverage from Moab, Utah. We're back. Let's get over to Moab, Utah and meet up with the gang from Superlift where they're about to take on the infamous Metal Masher Trail.
I'm Fred Perry from Clemson 4-Wheel Center in South Carolina, all the way out here in Moab, Utah. We're going to do a trail today called Metal Masher, which has got a few interesting little points in it. The main thing is scenery. We're going to get about 1,800 feet above the main highway and look down on it. Be able to see all over the country from the high point. We'll cover some canyons and some high points, and we've got a little bit of cloud cover this morning shading us, keeping the temperature crisp this morning, but it's going to get hot later. Yeah, we got a couple of real nice obstacles on this one. One of them is Rock Chucker, which is just a straight up climb. You've got to pile a few rocks at the bottom just to get started over the undercut. And another one is an interesting climb that's got an undercut rock to start out and another climb that's almost timed at the wheelbase length. So wheelbase is a major thing today, and we got a little bit of variety of all of it. So we'll have a lot of fun. Careful little stuff.
Well, Fred, we couldn't ask for a better day. So let's hit the trail and see what we can get ourselves into. Now, I don't know about you, but these guys look like they might cause some trouble by the end of the day. Well, the group comes to their first obstacle. What? I knew it! I told you these guys were trouble.
The suspect should be considered armed and dangerous. There's no way to do it that way.
Now, if any of you bumper companies needs a top-of-the-line bumper tester, the driver, JP, is your man. JP asked the owner of Superlift, Brett Lovett, for a raise. You think he might want to ask if he still has a job.
Got a raise all the time.
All right, Fred, show the group how it's done. Time to move on to the next obstacle, but not before Sam Gillis gives Trent a reaction test. And guess what, Trent? You pass with cat-like reactions. Kevin Dill and his Widowmaker have no problem with the help of Hemi Power Plant. Kevin, your tire... Never mind. Anyway, the next obstacle is named Widowmaker. And our guide for the day, Fred Perry, is going to show the group how it's done. Fred's co-pilot quickly becomes a spotter, and with his help, the two find their way to the top of the Widowmaker. Good job, guys. All right, Sam, your turn. Now, Sam Gillis is from Alabama, where the wheeling is a lot different from what Moab has to offer. With just a little time under his belt, Sam was on his way.
Hi, I'm Sam Gillis. I'm from a little town just north of Birmingham called Mount Olive, Alabama. I'm driving a 89 YJ, sitting on a 1-ton running gear. Got a late model Vortex 6.0 liter motor in it. Dana 60 front end, 14 bolt rear end.
Sam's telling the group, we better keep up with Fred. He's the one with all the food, and he went that way. You're right, Sam. Next was lunch for the group, and along with it comes a bird's eye view of Highway 191 leading into Moab. And I tell you what, it's hard to hold down your lunch when you're this high up. So it wasn't long, and we were back on the trail. Chris Durham, owner of Chris Durham Motorsports, was known as the Slide Hog in grade school. And as you can see, things haven't changed much. All laughter to the side, Chris Durham is probably the best driver in the group, and showing us some of his driving skills, his Jeep loses its rear coil spring. With the assistance from his co-pilot, Chris had his Jeep up and climbing in no time. On this attempt, the Jeep's front end starts sliding to the left. The right rear end of the vehicle is sitting on a giant rock, keeping Chris from backing out of this one.
Chris Durham from Pekin, South Carolina. Got a 2000 model Sahara. Got a little minor technical difficulty on a short wheelbase. It's a little bit too vertical.
With the help of Keith Bailey, Chris was soon on his way. Superlift would like to thank Fred Perry for being our trail guide on today's Superlift Run on Metal Masher. And everybody who took part in this run, see you all next year.
Jamie Morgenthau, this is my co-pilot, J.P. Pritchard. We're out here to make sure everything is safe and under control and nobody gets hurt.
Well, Metal Masher sure gave the boys from Superlift a run for their money. Don't go anywhere. When we get back, Trent's finishing up the transfer case and drive shafts for Project Budget Buggy. Welcome back to Superlift's Off-Road Adventures. Let's get back to the garage where Trent's putting the lid on that transfer case and drive shafts for the Budget Buggy.
Well, that looks pretty good. Now, after filling up the transfer case with the recommended amount of fluid, the next step is to mock up the cable shifter for the planetary box. Now, the Atlas 4-speed includes this cable shifter, but they also have air shift and even electric shift options. When using a cable shifter, there will be some adjustment required. You want to be sure that the cable allows the lever to fully engage in each direction. Now, to check it, just remove the screw and make sure that the cable is still lined up with the lever. Now, I've actually already adjusted this up, so it's all good to go. Just need to remove this bracket in order to install the transfer case. But before we do that, we need to swap out these yokes here. You see, these are 1330 series yokes, which are decent for average trail use, but the Budget Buggy here is going to be anything but. When, with the extreme amount of gearing in the transfer case, anything downstream of it is going to be under an extreme amount of stress. So we called up the guys at JE Reel and asked for some advice. After discussing our needs and uses, they recommended upgrading to 1350 series drive shafts. J.E. Reel's Canyon Crawler drive shafts are constructed out of high-quality materials made entirely in the USA. Now, this tubing is heavy-gauge steel, so they should be able to withstand any impacts they might encounter out on the trail, and these 1350 series CVs allow greater angularity to accommodate the long-travel suspension on the buggy. Now, in order to run these 1350 series CVs, we need to replace the standard yoke with these drive flanges. Now, this is just an unbolt and replace operation. Now, let's get these yokes swapped out, and then we can install the transfer case in the Jeep. All right, we have the speedometer drive gear installed along with the four-wheel drive switch. It's full of oil, and we have swapped the drive shaft flanges. So this baby is ready to go in the buggy. Now, one special note on the Atlas is that they have a variety of different mounting locations. This allows you to raise or lower the front output to maximize ground clearance as well as driveline angle. Now, one special note when using the Atlas behind a 5-speed out of a TJ is that you must install this aluminum spacer ring. This prevents the input from bottoming against the transmission. Now, as you're installing this, you want to be sure and do it by hand. Do not use the mounting bolts to suck the transfer case to the transmission. By the way, real good idea to have some help for this. Oh yeah, I could get used to this whole removable floorboard thing. Makes life a lot easier. But anyway, bolting the transfer case in place is really the easy part. And as you can see here, we've clocked it to where it is nearly flat. That allows us to maximize ground clearance and use this flat belly pan here. Now, once it's bolted in place, you can address the shifters. Now, the shifter assembly is really pretty cool. It's a piece of all thread in here along with a piece of tubing. Now, this allows you to lengthen or shorten the pieces as needed to put the shifters where you want them. Now, also, Advanced does sell several different types of handles to accommodate the factory floorboard hole in, say, a regular TJ. Obviously, that is not a problem in this case, so all we're going to do is take this center transmission tunnel piece and trim it to accept the shifters. And let's not forget our third shifter. I've put this in several different places, but I think it's going to work best right here. Now, this little housing is going to bolt right to the bottom of the tunnel. Oh yeah, it's going to be nice. It's going to be levers and stuff everywhere. Now, before I got too crazy with installing the floorboards, I figured it'd be a good idea to install the drive shafts. After all, it's a lot easier to get to the bolts with the floor pans out of the way. Now, the guys at J.E. Reel really know four-wheel drives. All I had to do was take a baseline measurement with the vehicle at ride height and explain what front and rear axles we had. Lo and behold, they sent us the perfect shaft to accommodate this non-stock flanged Ford 8.8. Now, it looks like there's a lot of spline showing here, but actually this is one of J.E. Reel's long spline drive shafts. So even at full extension, which is the absolute worst this drive shaft is going to see, there's still plenty of spline engagement. Just get this puppy bolted up and we should be good to go. Oh yeah, that is perfect. So some measuring and some trim work later, and we have all the shifters installed on our tranny tunnel. Now, the Atlas even includes these nice little boots to help finish off the look of the interior. Of course, I still need to order one for the transmission. Now, some of you may be wondering exactly what all these levers do. Well, I'll get more into exactly what they do once we get the buggy out on the trail. But the thing to remember is that these two levers operate the front and rear axles independently of one another. That way, if you need to do a front or rear burn, you can just disconnect one or the other. Now, this third lever operates that secondary low range. Now, at this point, we are definitely over the hump. I just have some details to finish up, you know, like the dash, a little bit of wiring, the seats, and some very special tires and wheels. You're just going to have to wait till next time to see what we have up our sleeves for that. I don't know about you guys, but I have spent enough time working on this thing. I am ready to drive it. Oh yeah, Euro style, baby.
Who'd have thought the budget buggy would come together so well? Before long, it will be crawling with the big boys. When we get back, Trent's got a little tech tip to keep you out on the trails.
Whenever you install significantly larger tires on your rig, you should seriously consider changing the axle gear ratios as well, because if you don't, you will be forcing your truck's engine to operate below its power band, and that means performance and fuel economy are going to suffer. Now, there are a variety of different formulas out there for calculating the ratio you need, but you know what? Some are more accurate than others. I personally prefer to figure out what RPM the truck is running at a given speed in stock form, and then match that RPM as closely as possible with the new tires and gears. Now, the formula is pretty simple. Here it is. We have RPM equals miles per hour times gear ratio times 336, all divided by tire diameter. Now, let's say we have a truck with 308 gears and 28-inch tall tires. If you run the numbers, at 65 miles an hour, the truck's running at 2,400 RPM. Now, let's swap out those 28s for some 36-inch tall tires. If you run the numbers again, it comes out to 1,868 RPM. That is a 550 RPM drop compared to stock. Not good. Now, you can use this formula to figure out what ratio you need. Running the numbers again, with 410 gears and those same 36s at 65 miles an hour, we've got 2,487 RPM. And that is about as close to stock as you're going to get. Now, I hate math just as much as anybody else, but sometimes running the numbers is important. So, write this formula down and put it somewhere where you can find it. And that is your Tech Tip of the Week.
Power wagon. Hemi. Big Hemi.
The beast.
You'd probably like to take a look at. Well, this is my splurge item for Budget Buggy. You see,
First, you have to remember how to use it.
That sounded good.